the question. I don't know what 11 means. I don't know if that's good or not. You know, I think having that extra information so that if another parent can't be there, then they can have that conversation at home as well. Because I know when I went for my very first parent-teacher conference, and they told me what my son's DRA score was, and I went home and I told my husband what the DRA score was, and he's like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. Yeah. That's the score. You're a teacher. You should know. I don't know. So I think having that extra sheet would help. The other thing that I'm kind of thinking, especially since there's this space on the sheet, because I know that there are other schools, like TIP schools and that type of thing, who do this standards-based type of report card, but they also give the letter grade. So maybe as to ease the transition from going to yes, no, and letter grades, maybe give them the safety blanket of the grades so they can see, you know, how are they doing letter grade wise, and also see how they are on the standards based as well.
That's certainly a conversation that we can have, and probably one that we'll have at the end of the year. So, yeah, good.
I think you're getting way more information, so I like it.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I certainly want to applaud the effort that the teachers are making in consistency, a grade card to grade what that's consistent with the expectations. I think it's great. And of course, you always run the risk when you innovate, somebody saying, that is really cool, and it would be even better if we just. Yeah. So, you know, I have to resist a couple of those things, but certainly I would echo that challenge that we have in that interface between not only what the teachers are doing with that student, but also what the parents want to be able to, that they want to plug in that process, you know, help with the homework, understand if their student is behind or ahead, and so that communication, I think, is pretty important, and I know you guys will work on that.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll take any input, you know, to make this better. Because ultimately we want that readiness piece and we want that parent communication to match. So.
It's so collaborative now on these early grades, and it's just the coolest thing. And I understand that collaboration continues, and so it will get even better, I would expect. I'm curious where, well, I guess it's just part of that same communication with the parents. You know, if my son or daughter is just excelling, I want to know that too, rather than just they're good. And I would expect that this information provides that opportunity sort of quantitatively in that parent-teacher conference.
Oh, absolutely. I think this will tell you exactly, it will give you an idea of exactly where they stand and what they're able to do. And that was our ultimate goal here anyway, is to be able to do that.
Not just minimum standards, but how far above.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of talk with that DRA about just going to the ceiling, you know, but it was the teachers who have the high kids that were saying, I want to know how high they can go. So they said, we don't want to just reach the ceiling. We want to take them as far as we can. You know, comprehension is important. So that was good conversation.
I just have one more question. On the former method, they also included things like art, music, and PE. But so are those?
That's a good question.
Not going to be included?
No, I don't have the whole report card here for you to see. We have taken the same thing in music, in PE, in art, and in science, and we've had them list some essential criteria for those grade levels, or for those subjects too. So you will be able to see what's important in music and how your student is performing in music, as opposed to just a random grade in music. So the music teachers were thrilled when we talked to them about adding some of that on there, because I think their comment was, we get to do that, so they were pretty excited.
Leanne, I just want to add a thanks to you and your committee. As a parent, I know the seventh graders are our youngest, so we've been through a lot of years of elementary report cards recently, and it seemed like the teachers were always supplementing the report card with other information to help us understand where our daughter was really functioning. consistent and to get a framework in place here. And there's been lots of suggestions, and I know your committee will consider suggestions and will continue to innovate. But I think, and I think that's what I've heard from the board is we're headed the right direction. And while we may need to make some minor tweaks, I do think we're going to have a tool that's going to be better and it's going to help our communication with parents going down the road, and that's what's important.
Thank you.
Have teachers heard, I mean, I know I've heard a few comments from some parents, but have the teachers received feedback on the report cards as well from the parent-teacher conferences?
I've asked that question as I've gone around to talk to different principals and coaches and teachers, and really they haven't heard very much. So I think what we're hearing from is really a handful of parents on Facebook, and I appreciate you reporting to them and giving them the facts. But again, it's not perfect, and we do want feedback, and we'll make changes at the end of the year. We just want a good reporting system. So thanks for your support.
I think it's good that we've kind of picked up on some comments and some opinions from social media, and I think that it's good. Those are valid comments and ones that we need to consider and take seriously. So I think it's great that we've got our ears and eyes where they're supposed to be. So good communication.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ann. Moving on to new business. Dr. Carlin, are you going to lead this discussion?
Yeah, I'll kind of kick things off, and then we've got a couple of experts here that maybe can add to and answer any questions. It may or may not be very well known, but the road around the high school, the ring road around the high school is not actually a city street. It's actually district property. Looks like a street, has speed limit signs up like a street, but it's not actually a city street. It's I guess considered in their terms law enforcement kind of like private property. So when there's a minor traffic issue that occurs, the law enforcement doesn't have the capability to deal with that unless it kind of rises to an extreme level. We've had a number of situations where I guess we feel like in the interest of safety for kids, it would be nice if the police could be more involved in enforcing the same city ordinances that they enforce out on any other street in town, not only on that road, but in our parking lots, and not only at the high school, but throughout the district. Obviously, the high school is probably where this has come to light the most because we have a lot of young drivers there, and we have some that choose not to respect the speed limit. We have accidents that occur in our parking lots, and what the police can do is limited. No different than I guess it would be like in a Walmart parking lot type of situation. We have had a couple of pedestrians who have been involved in minor accidents this year. I don't think we've had anybody who's been seriously injured, but it certainly has raised our level of concern. I think we also maybe have some situations where we have kids exhibiting some unsafe behaviors, maybe standing on top of a car while the car is moving, and things that if that was going on a public street, law enforcement could assist in dealing with those issues. So there's maybe a little known state law that's out there that if the board passes the resolution that's before you, then beginning on January 1st, law enforcement would be able to enforce the city ordinances on our property just like they were a city street. We would have a period of time here between now and January 1st where we would educate students and parents that that's going to be a little change over what we currently do. But I can assure you right now, our students at the high school understand that they're not going to get a ticket for speeding for how they drive on the road at the high school. That's something that's understood by the kids. And so we will, if the board passes this resolution, then we will spend the time between now and when we release the semester making sure that we've informed students and parents that point out that this, if the board passes this, this is not an effort to be punitive. This is an effort to make sure that our kids are safe. And I'd like our SROs to share a little bit about kind of how they would see dealing with this, because it's not about how many kids we can ticket. It's about making sure that kids learn to drive responsibly and behave responsibly there, and just like no different than what happens when they get out on the Mary Street. Also, and this would pertain to all district properties, I don't think we have any other district property that has quite the linear mileage that we have at the high school. But we do have situations where we have accidents, and right now I think we have a lot of battles going on between insurance companies, and probably could simplify some of that process if this was enacted. So Randy Unruh and Ben Weeks are here. They're our SROs at Garden City High School. And, they live this every day, so we kind of like them to share a little bit from their perspective on what this might be.
Can I interrupt real quick? It doesn't apply to all school district property. It will not apply to Plymouth or Ginny Barker because
Correct.
they are not within the
Thank
limits
you.
of Garden City.
Right. Anything within the city limits. Thank you. That's correct.
This actually came to light. Our principals were sitting in a meeting at the end of the day like we do with them, and they watched a kid on top of a vehicle, and we didn't have any teeth. There wasn't anything that we could do. The school was able to punish him, and I think it was the next day or a couple days later, we had 2 more kids doing the same thing. And we just felt there was a need to educate the students and maybe have some discipline that they don't currently have. This does not just apply to students, it would be staff and parents as well. And we've gotten complaints about some staff members and some parents driving. So it wouldn't be, it's not just about the kids, but it's about anybody that drives onto the property and making sure that they're safe. You know, we had a pedestrian accident a week or 2 ago. A kid got hit in the crosswalk. So being able to, whether we write a ticket or give a warning, just some further education to the drivers that come onto the property. And the pedestrians as well, because then the pedestrian laws would apply too.
So safety is the number one.
Absolutely, yeah.
For the change.
At the end of the school day, I typically walk out through the parking lot and just roam back and forth and just watching traffic. There are things that aren't safe, but in order for me to be able to legally stop someone and talk to them about their behavior, I have to have legal justification for that. And if there's not a traffic violation, I can't even stop them to talk to them, because then we get into a search and seizure issue with the Constitution. And so if we had the ability just to stop and talk to them about it, because most of the kids, when you stop and talk to them and be like, hey, you understand why this isn't safe? They're like, oh yeah, I just hadn't thought about it. You know, you can run through some things real easily, because like Dr. Carlin said, everybody there knows that we can't write a ticket. And you'll hear conversations about that in the hallways. My goal would be that, yeah, we get the word out, hey, it's gonna change. We're gonna be able to write tickets, and that everybody understands that, so come January 1st, everybody starts driving with a little more care, because they understand that. Because believe me, I don't have enough time in my day to sit out there and write tickets to violations all the time, nor do I want to do that. But just the ability to be able to stop and talk to a kid and say, hey, this isn't safe, it's not legal, and this is why. I think a lot of them respect that, and you can see changes in behaviors on the instances where we've been able to do that.
And it would be much like on the city streets, officers have discretion. Not every time they pull someone over, they don't get a ticket. Every time we give warnings, it would be very much the same. And so if I wrote a ticket for every violation I saw, we'd have the traffic backed up like crazy, and we don't want to have that either. So there will be some give and take, but definitely to be able to use it when we need to would be nice.
And I would sure think that if this resolution is passed, that early on you would do a lot more warnings than anything else, just to get the new culture established and let the kids know there are consequences and they will be enforced.
And there won't be, it's not like we're gonna invite the whole police department up there on the first day that it's
Hey,
enacted
it's
and
fair
say,
game.
fair game.
Like hide and seek.
We've all discussed that. Nobody wants that. It would just, even if we, the kid parks their vehicle, we saw the violation, couldn't get them stopped, if we could chat with them later and explain, here's what could have happened, this is what the fine could be, you know, it's almost mocking sometimes. They know that we don't have the ability, so they drive by and wave without their seatbelt on, and I'll stand at the crosswalk sometimes and remind them to put their seatbelts on, but it's a nice request, and maybe they follow it, but right now they know we can't, so.
I know there was a principal that spoke with a student the other day and told him, hey, you need to slow down, you're driving too fast, and he walked out of their office and said, I'm not gonna slow down, there's nothing they can do about it. It's those type of violations that the repeat offenders that obviously haven't learned, those are the ones that actually need a citation, have some sort of a penalty associated with it. But those that can be educated by warnings, I mean, principals talk to them now, we mention it in passing, but to be able to do an official warning, whatever, to be able to actually stop them as a police officer and say, hey, this is a problem, has a pretty good impact too most of the time.
Well, I think it's good that parents and staff are eligible for the same rules and regulations. So.
Yeah.
Tom, did you have something you wanted to add? You just stretching over there?
I do have a question. Have we had any problems with the second entrance after games? Any disturbance or speeding up and down Pioneer?
I haven't heard of any complaints, but we didn't have a lot of games this year. I think we had 4, and a couple of them, the crowd started filtering out much before the game was over. So by the time we got the Pioneer gate open, it was just nice traffic flow. We do have an officer that sits at campus in Pioneer, so he can at least help get traffic out at that point, but I haven't heard any major complaints.
Because I knew that was one of our major concerns from some residents up in that area, that there would be some high speeds and danger for students leaving after school, but in any event, that's good to hear. Appreciate it.
And we do still keep it closed after school, it's not open.
Right.
What about the fact that the parking stalls are painted so that they're right angles, parallel instead of diagonal?
Yeah, but I didn't pay the parking lot, so.
But do you think that would help to decrease,
Some of the parking problems
Yeah.
or the accidents?
just from your experience? I know it's kind of
Well-
off the subject, but,
I don't know, it might.
yeah.
I will say though that one of the accidents that I worked, the kids had created their own angle parking and it caused an accident. So I don't, 6-1
That
half
was
is
my
the other.
kids.
Actually, it wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't,
No.
another one?
It was that first week of school, we worked a lot of
Okay.
them. And it's just, once they get used to it, and you'll notice if you go to the far north end, the lines are blurred. They kind of park,
Yeah.
they space themselves out, and as long as they're not hurting anybody right now, but then they have an accident, and all we do right now is hand them forms.
Yeah.
And then usually we hope the kids fill them out, because I don't expect that they're gonna sit there in the cold or out in the heat and fill them out, but.
I just want whatever's safest and decrease the amount of expense for parents to have cars fixed, et cetera. So, Jean?
I just wanted to say I do support this because I think that the high school is very close to a high-speed highway. It's also very close to neighborhoods where, children could be out riding their bicycles or walking home from an elementary school. And I think generally what you do on the high school property, you tend to forget that you just left the high school property and those same speeds or those same maybe dangerous things that they're doing, could carry over into those neighborhoods or onto the highway. And I think that, this is part of our creating responsible citizens, is that we're teaching them, these are the rules of if you want to be driving in Kansas. I think this is a good idea. I wasn't aware that there was any distinction. I think, it's unique to the students probably that they are and are taking advantage of that. I think it's probably a much better idea to make sure that they're safe and that the people around them are safe.
Just to let everybody know, I asked Dr. Aitha to see what some of the other 6A, 5A high schools would do, because I know a few of them have, not probably as much, but similar situations. And basically came back to nobody was even really aware of this resolution, and they're really fascinated and can't wait to see what happens when we do it.
I talked to Dodge City, for example, like their school resource officer, and said, hey, what are you guys doing? And he said, waiting for you.
Yeah, we're the beta site.
And then I talked to one of the Kansas City area schools, and they're familiar with it, but their setup doesn't necessarily need, they have a lot of streets, public streets, so they're able to do that. So Derby, I was hoping to hear back from because they have a similar setup, and I never heard back from anybody at that school district. But it sounds like everybody's kind of waiting to see what this looks like. And everybody that I emailed sent me a copy of the state statute, which is the resolution. And I appreciate that, but that wasn't what you were going for. We got that far.
My concern is even though what has been said is that this is not intended to be punitive, the municipal ordinances are much more punitive than state statute. And we are looking at, I mean, I know once they hit off of USD-457 property, you can ticket them all you want. But, in dealing with municipal court, a no driver's license, a second time offense, you're looking at 5 days in jail. And if you're under the age of 18, that's 5 days in the juvenile detention center at $180 a day. And those kids are probably the ones who are on the cusp of whether or not they're gonna stay at the high school. I'm very concerned with doing this and the power that we are giving up as a school district to be able to discipline as well. I think there are other ways that we can do this rather than giving that over to the city. I know the two of you, and I know that you two won't take advantage, so to speak, but I've seen how many SROs have been around since I've been in Garden City, and I know you're not gonna be there forever. Eventually you'll wanna retire. So my concern is who's following you and what is their take on this? And I'm just really concerned, even if it's a parent who's being charged with these things, and say it's a third time, and they're now in jail for 30 days, and what's gonna happen with those kids? Are we now making a senior responsible for that family? I just see that this has a lot of different issues, and the attorneys that I've talked to in town are very concerned about us adopting this resolution for the school district, and have voiced their concern to me, and I can't support this resolution. I'm very worried. I understand the safety issues, but I believe the safety issues can be addressed in other methods. Thanks.
I'm wondering if this is something like we commonly do with a lot of other significant policies where we air it and then we come back at a later date to consider it. If this would be something maybe in light of Laura's comments, to take that approach. So that the public has a little bit of lead time. I think some of the challenges that we face at the high school are right on point with the purposes of this resolution. Somehow we've got to figure out how to deal with them. I mean, you can post signs and say, next month, what you're doing now could give you a ticket or whatever. But I'm wondering on this particular resolution if it might be prudent to sort of serve the public notice with this airing and conversation, and then consider it again.
To think about it and ask around as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem for Garden City High School, and, but there are other sort of ramifications, I think, that Laura has pointed out that maybe we need to consider as a community just a little bit more.
Getting into that tonight.
My concern is when you talk about giving out warning tickets, when do you say, okay, this guy's gonna get a ticket? And then I get a ticket, and Tom Blackburn had gotten 2 warnings for the exact same thing that you're giving me a ticket for. So my concern is, at some point, you're gonna have to give a ticket, and at some point, that person's gonna say you're being unfair to me because you've never given me a warning, and you've given all these other kids warnings, and now you're giving me a ticket where someone might say, you know, you guys are prejudiced and you're giving me a ticket because I'm brown, or whatever the case may be. That's just an example. So I'm cautious about you guys giving out warning tickets. You know, if we're gonna do it, I'd say give tickets out. If they were on city streets, they would get a ticket. And if we're gonna say, we're gonna do it just the same if they were on city streets, then we should give a ticket. Because you're not gonna remember how many warning tickets you gave to Tom Blackburn and how many warning tickets you gave to Tim Cruz.
Will a warning be on their record? Would you be able to look it up with their?
In our system, when we stop somebody, we run them by their name and their date of birth or their driver's license. And then we'll say, you know, this subject was given a warning for speed. If I stop somebody, I can say, can you check for priors, any priors for speed? And our dispatchers can look it up and let us know
That they had.
if they have priors. With me, I mean, I don't know, I think it's completely officer discretion, and everybody does it a little bit different. But a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, to me, the traffic laws are an opportunity for education. So I don't have to educate with a piece of paper. It may just be a conversation. Hey, you're 16 years old, you're a new driver, this is against the law, and here's why. Here's why we don't want you to drive like this.
That's the same whether it's on a high school street or public
Yep.
street, right?
Yep.
Well, you know, our focus is being model schools, blue ribbon school, college and career readiness. And in the field I am, all our employees are CDL drivers. And we don't want people to have warning tickets and tickets. So where we send the message that if you break the law on the Garden City High School campus, you're gonna get a ticket, and that can affect your future, as Laura talks about. So I guess I'm very cautious of adopting this. I think it's important, because I don't want to see a kid get killed. I want people to have insurance like I have to have insurance. I want them to follow the same rules that I have to follow. Just because they're a sophomore, they're still driving a vehicle just like I'm driving a vehicle, and they have the same laws that I have to obey. So that's where I say, I guess I'm cautious of how we're going to do this fairly and legally, because I feel they should get a ticket if they're doing something wrong. But, you know, I'm sure it depends on their attitude and how they talk to you and all that good stuff. So I'd say I'm cautious as Laura, but maybe a little bit different way. So.
That's fair. Okay, well, I think that unless there's a reason we have to make a decision tonight, it doesn't look like there is. So the next opportunity for us to discuss this further would be a Friday morning, December 19th. I'm okay with that, as long as everyone else is.
I'm okay with it, I won't be here, but I'm okay with it.
Okay.
And if you want to push it into January, I mean, I'm sure we can adjust the date in the resolution and set this to start at any point.
I think it makes sense to start it in January if we're going to, so I'd like to keep it in this calendar year if we can, decision making.
Well,
There
but
might-
December 19th is the last day of school, so if we approve it, there's no time for student contact, because they're gonna be gone for a couple weeks.
Again, I think we could adjust the date, and even if the date's that in the resolution, I'm sure we can work something out with law enforcement where we say, give us 2 weeks, 3
Make
weeks.
it a February 1 start date as opposed to a January 1.
So we're leaning towards discussing it further at the regular, next Monday night meeting.
Well, either way, but if you approve it on the 19th, then we will probably push the date back into January sometime, maybe all the way to the 1st of February to do the education piece. If we wait until January 19th and then approve it, we'll probably push it a little further into February before we start really doing enforcement with it.
I'd suggest having the vote on 19th, but modifying the start time, if that's the will of the board. That way, we've got a month to educate, so, rather than the last day of school, oh, by the way, when you get back, this is what's gonna happen to you, and it might
Right,
make it to everybody.
right, yeah, good clarification. I want to make sure there's plenty of time for education.
Is everyone except Tom planning to be here?
discussion item, the rest would be payables for the most part. So I don't know how long it would be.
I think maybe we ought to delay it to a Monday meeting so that any community members who are interested in speaking might have an opportunity to come in, and that all of the board members would
Not rush it.
here, because it could always be delayed. I mean, if it's going to be delayed into the new year, you delay just a little bit longer. I think it's a great idea, but I do think it put it everybody.
It's still noteworthy to sort of caution the few at the high school that seem to be ignoring good driving safety, what they're pushing us to consider now, and the effect that can have on their fellow students. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but.
And if there's some other way we could deal with it, I'd like to have that information. You know, what else could we do besides give warning tickets and real life tickets? What else could we do to be enforceable on someone riding on the top of the car? I mean, if that guy or girl would fall off, they could have a major head damage and die, you know, and then it's back on us. Why did you gotta do something? You knew it was happening. You know, so if we're not gonna do that, I think we need to do something, and I don't know what else is out there. You know, there's gotta be some school doing something.
Do we issue parking permit for every student? So what's the exam on a parking permit? I mean, is it just to apply for it and pay your fee to get that sticky note on your car that you're a licensed driver, I believe they have to do?
Show license and a registration.
But there are fines and abilities to revoke and to suspend if there's violations with regard to that.
That's kind of
What
what
I
I
was
said.
wondering is if we're already doing that, then why don't we set up a traffic court, have our law one students do it, and keep the money for ourselves, because it sounds like we're gonna need it. I know what we need is more time to discuss this subject, so I'm looking, looks like January 12th is the next Monday meeting, is that correct? Okay, so I suggest that we continue this discussion on that meeting time, and that way the public will have some information, some time to talk about it and come if they want to discuss it further as well, so.
And
Good
Steve,
discussion.
if you guys could get us anything else out there.
And you too, if you
I'd
have
appreciate it.
suggestions on something we can do that's.
Well, I can
less
talk to
permanent.
the city prosecutor and see if she has, we had talked briefly, I think last week about maybe different ways to handle it. We didn't come up with any specifically, but maybe we could come up with something.
Just now that you know the concerns that a couple board members have, which are valid
Or at least I could
concerns.
invite her to, we have her come to the next meeting and at least be able to answer questions.
Sure, will you let her know?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yep.
All right,
Thank you for all that you two do.
yeah,
I really
thank you.
appreciate it.
I'm
Thank you
sure
so
you're
much.
not thanked very often. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item of new business is the Kansas Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly. Laura is our delegate, and she has asked for our comments. I think we really didn't set up a good way of getting our information to her, so this is a good opportunity if you have comments to pass on to her. This is the time to do so. Any specific, I think there's one vote you're gonna have on.
Well, we have to approve the legislative agenda or committee report and then vote for the president's elect designee. And there's only one person running.
And we
So,
saw her video, that one.
her name is, for those of you who weren't there, her name is Amy Martin. She's currently on the school board for Olathe. She does have a special needs child, which is part of the reason why she got involved with the school board. The comments on the video and what I've seen, she seems to be very diligent, and she actually emailed me while we were sitting here as well, giving me her phone number and saying, if you have any questions, let me know. So, she seems like a good candidate, so.
And who else is going to the meeting? Three of us, four of us, awesome.
That is okay.
That's all.
There you
let me know.
Thank you. Any other open discussion items that needs to be discussed now?
I did just throw in here, those of you that are going, able to work that into your schedule, thanks. I know it's one more unpaid commitment that you make as part of being on the board. If we can help with your travel arrangements, please check. I know Dr. Ape is planning on meeting up with you when you get to Kansas City, so, but if you need to check with us on room arrangements and all that kind of stuff, give us a call so we can make sure everything's in place for you when you get there.
What night are you buying dinner? Oh,
I'm not gonna say on record.
Okay, any other discussion items? Okay, with that being said, the next board meeting will be on Friday, December 19th at 7:30 a.m. in this